right, good afternoon, everyone. I see the noonday gun has gone off here in Cape Town in our studio where we are. A warm welcome to today's high impact webinar called Student Housing Gold, How to Secure, Finance, Scale Profitable Student Accommodation Investments. It's really fantastic to have you all here with us today. So before we dive in, I would say to our attendees, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. There's a chat box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and tell us where you're joining from, and maybe give a shout out to the teams from REI, from Business Partners, and also my student house. And today's session proudly brought to you by Real Estate Investor in partnership with Business Partners, the entrepreneur's financier, alongside my student house, a leading national property manager and investor in the student accommodation sector. So I'm Neale Petersen. I'm founder and content in chief of REI, and I'll be your host and moderator for this session. So if you're new to REI, welcome. Since 2007, we've been a trusted voice in the South African property space. Our mission is to inform, connect, and empower property investors, professionals, and entrepreneurs through our monthly real estate investor magazine, our rei.co news and learning platform, our weekly webinars, our interviews and newsletters, and our live event seminars and investor working opportunities. Just go to www.rei.co.za to explore more. So let's talk a little bit about today's session and why it matters so much to all of you. Student accommodation remains one of the most resilient and scalable niches in the residential investment market. And today's session is designed to equip you with practical insights, proven strategies, and tailored financing solutions to help you secure the right property, access the funding, even up to 100%, avoid costly mistakes, and scale your portfolio for long-term success. So today, you can learn how to identify and convert the right properties, even in uncertain or competitive markets. We'll look at 100% funding options, how business partners can help you finance your project. We'll also look at proven strategies from the field, how Retha van Rooyen has built a successful portfolio and avoided common pitfalls. We'll look at a little bit of legal budgeting setup essentials, what to provide, how to budget, and how to protect yourself. And we'll look at the long-term growth, why student housing is not only high yield, but it's also sustainable. So just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and a replay link will be available and to be sent to all attendees that registered for this webinar. And for those that have not registered, you will get it on the rei.co.za website, and that will be up tomorrow on the website. For questions, fire away. You use the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, we'll deal with as many as we can at the end of the webinar. So please post the question. No such thing as a stupid question. Please post it into the Q&A box. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panelists. And joining me today are really two outstanding leaders in this high yield, high demand space. First of all, we've got Retha van Rooyen. She's the CEO of My Student House, also experienced investor and author of Creating Wealth in Student Accommodation in South Africa. Retha, do you want to give a shout out to the audience today and tell a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, yeah, so like Neale did the whole introduction there, but I started with student accommodation back in 2020. I thought that was going to be the beginning and the end of it, but like Neale said, it's a very resilient space, and we managed to grow from there. And now we in Cape Town, Port, PE, Bloemfontein, Joburg, Vanderbijl, and just growing from strength to strength, doubling up in numbers every year. And we also focus on helping new landlords get into the space. A lot of people want to get into it, but they're a little bit scared. They've heard some horror stories. and we try and help them with the end-to-end process and just smoothing out and making it a little bit less stressful. And as far as we can, no stress at all in this process. And that's basically what we do.
That's good to hear. No stress at all. And then, of course, secondly, our second panelist is Reinard Botha. He's the regional manager at Partners Ltd, one of South Africa's most trusted property finance institution for entrepreneurs. So, Reinard, do you want to give a shout out and introduction to the audience today, please?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, as you said, I work for Business Partners. I'm the area manager for the West Coast Metro team. We have offices right across the country, and we've been doing this for about 40 years. I think some of my background is I studied accounting and law at Stellenbosch before spending some time in financial management and auditing, and now finding myself at Business Partners, where I think it really is my passion to try to help entrepreneurs and businesses to succeed and get access to funding that they need. Maybe more relevantly and more recently, the student accommodation market has been really strong, and we found a lot of viable opportunities there. So I think I'm really excited to get engaged with the discussion today.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, let's get cracking with the discussion. And, you know, as Reinard says, Retha, student housing is booming in South Africa. The demand exceeds 500,000. Last week we were also at the Reside conference, and we also heard from another of experts in that field. But let's unpack, you know, what is actually driving this urgent need for more accommodation, and why do you believe it's such a powerful entry point for new property investors?
So, Neil, at the moment, a lot of students are staying in really bad circumstances, and it's not conducive for them to learn and to succeed with their studies, right? So everybody is staying somewhere at the moment, but it's really about providing a better solution for the students to be more successful, and then getting them out of those bad circumstances into something that that they can be successful at. And it's the government is pushing to get more students, more school leavers into tertiary education, and they want to grow those numbers by another 500,000 in the next couple of years. So the growth of the funding that NSFAS and other bursary institutions are giving is just it outstrips all of the supply that's there at the moment. But you have to also be very careful in terms of the area that you go to, because certain spaces are a little bit oversupplied, if I can call it that, for a certain type of accommodation. Doesn't mean that another type of accommodation like purpose-built is saturated there, but maybe communes are. So you have to just, in terms of what you want to do and the type of accommodation you want to provide, you have to just be a little bit careful and zoom in on that environment that you want to target and where you want to be, so that you don't end up giving something that is not in demand at that specific place. But in terms of the volumes, we cannot keep up. I had, again, 10,000 more applications than beds this year that I couldn't help, students that I couldn't help. We're sitting now busy with second semester. I've had hundreds of applications again. We had a few beds open because of the TVETs and the second semester situation, and we don't have space again. So we definitely, there's still a very, very strong demand all over from my experience.
Absolutely. So demand, demand, demand. That's the underlying word. So Reinard, let me bring you here. From a finance perspective, what makes student housing an attractive, resilient property investment and fundable asset class for business partners?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, so for us, it really comes down to, it's a very simple assessment to make, and it's easy to give an in-principle decision. So for us, since we've done a number of them recently, it's really easy for us to do an estimate of the cost that it'll cost any investor to run the operation. It's really easy to estimate, since there is such a strong demand, the revenue that it'll be generating. We know the criteria from NSFAS if you're going for a NSFAS market, or if you're going for the private market. So we've got experience to assess that relatively easily. And then also you've got a really strong asset that serves as collateral for your loan. So specifically, once you've converted any property into a student accommodation, what typically happens is the market value of the property shoots up, which provides better collateral for my loan. So you've got the number of the key aspects already very easily verifiable, that being affordability, and the financial risk being the security. So it's a really strong and a really simple application for us to handle.
Okay, good. Well, that's good news, and I think there's a lot of investors out there today, and it's finding those right deals. And I think everybody's probably sitting here with bated breath and saying, "Well, I'd love to get into this market. I've just got the introduction to it." So, Retha, let's come back to you. Let's start off you telling us a little bit about your personal journey. How did you get started in student housing, and what drew you to this niche? And maybe just share what are the most important factors new investors should consider before buying a student accommodation property.
So, for a very long time, I worked in a corporate environment for a consulting company, and I needed something else to do because, as with any job, your increases and your expenses just, doesn't go together very well. So after some time, I started getting into property, did a few rentals, moved to Cape Town, and I'm like, okay, you hear property is so wonderful in Cape Town, but all of a sudden the rental income, is not that positive. So it's like, oops, okay, I need something else. So found a property, bought it. I was going to do a little bit of room rentals, that's multi-tenanted situation. And by accident, I found that it's actually quite close to a university shuttle stop. So I was like, okay, let's try this out. So it was a little bit by accident, the first one. And I tried it out, and my mind was absolutely blown. It was like 3-4 days, and that property was actually full. And it was like 35 beds at that time. So it's like, well, if it's this easy to fill these beds, then why am I doing anything else? But then, of course, COVID hit, and like 5 minutes later, everybody's gone home, and I'm like, oh no, great, I could fill it, but now here goes the income, because how am I going to get paid? Everybody went home. But it took a bit of time. But at the end of that year, because of the bursaries and that the fact that the guys had to come back, we were paid. So I'm like, this is really cool. People don't live there, but I still get paid. And, we filled up so quickly. And then from there, it just literally just grew. And I thought, I'm going to get another house and I'm going to have issues. I'm going to get another building to manage or for other landlords, whatever. And I had this, like, at some point, it's going to stop because I have all these properties. But every single year, it's the same story. So for 5 years in a row, the same story. We fill up so quickly, and from there on, it's for me much easier to work with students because I can literally, you can put house rules down, and it's like they're kind of in that space between a child and an adult, and it's not adults, which comes to you with all kinds of different problems. Students are easier to manage, especially if you're a parent of a teenager. It's a lot easier. And it just, from there on, I decided that's it. I'm not doing any other tenants anymore. We have so many issues with maintenance and non-payments and whatever else with them. And the students just, it worked. The things we need to look out for, there's obviously different things. But overall, it's definitely the most lucrative, and I just hyper focused on that and said, that's it. Now from here on, I'm just doing students. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for setting that scene, and I think you whet a lot of people's appetite to jump into this market. So Reinard, let's talk about the finance basics. How does Business Partners support housing investors, student housing investors, and what makes your particular funding approach unique?
Yeah, so when we look at any investment, we take quite a personal approach. From our point of view, we need to meet an entrepreneur and speak to them and meet them in person. It's a very personal. Like, you can do an application online, but we do want to go have a look at the property, discuss it with you, because we take a look at 3 key factors when we look at any investment. We don't have rigid ratios that we look at or rigid requirements. There are certain things that we do look at, but we'll make that clear early on in the application process. But principally, we look at 3 key issues, being one, firstly, the entrepreneur and his experience. Then we look at the business and the business risk, and then the third being the financial risk. And from those 3, we have to draw a conclusion as to whether we can fund this opportunity or not. In this instance, specifically to student accommodation, you already have the financial risk sort of solved. It's sort of out of your control because your underlying asset that provides my collateral is the student accommodation. So you really only have to control the business risk and your entrepreneurial risk. So that means I'm looking at your background. Do you have the relevant experience to be able to run a student accommodation? And then from a business risk, again, we know the market quite well, so we can easily deduce that. So the key cog in the wheel here that we'd be looking at is you. So as long as there's no significant gap between what you want to undertake and what you've done in the past, it shouldn't be a problem. So as an example, someone that's been running, let's say, a 2-bedroom flatlet from their house, now wanting to buy a 20 million rand property and convert to student accommodation, will probably say, yes, there's a strong market and it's a good opportunity, but we don't believe you've got the necessary experience to run that, unfortunately. So that's the kind of assessment we make, and it's, like I said, not rigid, and the whole process involves a lot of discussion and engagement. And I think at the end, both parties always walk away a bit wiser and knowing how to approach the next opportunity. And if we can't help you with this one, we'll have a very good view of what we can do for you.
Okay, excellent. No, that's good. So you walk sort of toe to toe with the entrepreneur, which is great. And it's nice to be able to work alongside your banker or your financier. So thanks for that, Reinard. So Retha, let's talk a little bit about how you've expanded your business. I mean, you've actually scaled across 4 cities. What key steps helped you scale successfully, and how did you identify your first property, and what gave you the confidence to dive into this niche?
Yeah, I think, just it's about exactly what Reinhard said. It's about what can I do versus what am I going into? And I was very worried when I found that first property. How does it work with students? What do I need to put in the rooms? How am I going to get my money? How does all of that work? So my first year, I had a partner she has done student accommodation before, and she had a building of about 100 students that she managed for someone. So I learned so much from her in that first year, and just even though the students were half the time not there, but the process is still the same when it comes to all of that. So that part for me was critical, to have someone with me that knew, or at least had some idea of how this works. And then from there, she then exited the business. She went on to doing imports and exports, but I then took the business forward and I ran with it from there. So I think to give you the confidence to start, you need somebody that has done it before, that knows and understands the complexities, because it is really, really complicated in the back end when you look at your onboarding, your accreditation, your NSFAS students versus other bursaries versus private students. It really can become extremely complex. And sometimes it's so hard for me to explain to a landlord why is one student's payment delayed versus another one that got paid 4 times already? But it's about that having that experience. And what we've done to mitigate the risk that Reinard was talking about with other banks is we've had clients coming to us and saying, listen, we don't have the experience. We have experience in development, for instance, but we don't know how to manage students. So as a developer, can we sign a contract with you? Can you be that management partner for us, bring the experience into this deal so that we can then get our funding with the institutions? We've done that multiple times, and we then become that almost like student rental asset manager that helps these people that's trying to get the funding in place. And and usually the financiers are happy with that as a solution. And then over time, if they then want to then take up and run the place themselves, that's also fine. For me, it's just about helping more students be in better circumstances. And if we can help somebody else to get it in place, that's what we're about.
Excellent. So I think it's very important if you're starting as an investor to get that kind of support and student accommodation. And we've already got a question about NSFAS, which we'll deal about later, because property management of student accommodation, it's a whole new ballgame. It's not something that we just go and collect the rent and we deal with the tenant directly, because it's a bit more complex than that. So I think that service that you're offering startups in particular is a great management service. You've got the experience in a number of cities. And so thanks for that, for sharing that, Retha. So Reinard, let's get back onto the finance. I mean, business partners, you offer up to 100% in some cases. Can you walk us through maybe how a deal like this is typically structured? And maybe just share what are some of the common misconceptions investors have about securing finance for student accommodation projects.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, let me start with your second question. I think one of the misconceptions is that you do need that you do need to put down a deposit to acquire your accommodation. Maybe just that clarifies our position in the market as well a little bit. We do take more risk on transactions, so we do not require you to put down a deposit always. In certain instances, we might. With student accommodation, the properties typically have quite a high yield, so it is possible to get your 100% funding over the line. I think a misconception is probably that we would fund passive investments into student accommodation, almost like a sideline income, which is not the market that we find ourselves in. We want to fund entrepreneurs that will be actively involved in running the student accommodation. We want to see that you'll invest your time when we'll bring the money to get the accommodation running. And I think what Retha said is very, very valuable to get their experience on board, to assist you to fill the gaps in your experience. And it definitely does make it a much more attractive funding prospect. So I would encourage everyone to make use of services like that and all the resources available. Discuss with the universities. It's very important to have a good relationship there. Make sure you understand the requirements of NSFAS. Make sure, especially on the admin side, there's been a lot in the media about them delaying payments and so forth, but we found that where people are on top of their admin and they do the process right, the struggles are like mitigated significantly. I think then to your second question, what the typical structure would look like. So as I said, we do, maybe I should clarify, 100% funding doesn't only mean 100% funding for the property cost. That also includes the transfer duties and any other legal fees. So essentially, when you are acquiring a student accommodation, we fund every cent and you don't have any upfront costs. But that does mean that we do take some exposure to the transaction. And that's one of the reasons why our pricing doesn't compare to what the bank offers. We sort of in a more of a risky market. Typically, our structure would be 10 years for property deals, with maybe some exclusions to that, but it's very remote that it'll be lower than 10 years. And then we do it in one of two ways. So we typically tailor our solutions to suit the cash flow needs of the business. So for example, if you need to take ownership of a building and it'll take you about 3 months to get it ready to get the students in place, we do offer that. We do acquire the property, we give you a capital moratorium for the first couple of months, and we can even disperse some of the funds to help you set it up properly to make it run efficiently, because there's no point in us starting to recover any funds if it's not generating significant funds to get there yet. So we do offer a tailored financial solution, and then we typically do it in one of two ways. So you'd have a term loan, which would be a prime +1, which is similar to what the bank offers. But then later on in the investment, when the cash flows can afford it, we start charging a small royalty percentage on either the market value of the property or the revenue that the company collects. But we're very transparent about that. That's very clearly explained to you, and you can assess the impact that has on your income. The alternative to a royalty structure would be, again, a prime +1 loan, but then with a shareholding buyback. So then, in essence, we buy the property with you. So you become a 70% owner, and we become a 30% owner. And then somewhere in the future, you need to buy back your shares. In both instances, that compensates us for the risk that we're taking on the investment. So because we are funding the full investment and not taking your deposit. And then secondly, it benefits you because you acquire the property from day one, no upfront cost. You can start operating and building your asset base. And typically by the time the company's been running for a while, you can refinance us with the bank if you so choose. But we are quite flexible in our payment structures. I think another way, which Kamin actually commented on in explaining the share buyback, which I know is not preferred, people don't like to get shares, but it's just a mechanism to have us get our return for the market that we're in. It's like a balloon payment on a car. So similar to that, but again, I don't want to go into too many details. I think the point being we structure it quite specifically to every specific customer's need.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Cool. So, Retha, let's get into the key features that make a student accommodation truly functional, desirable, and most importantly, profitable in this year. Because we gotta be creative.
Yeah, I think that obviously you have to get the basics right. Okay, if you want to be even if you're not in the NSF space, that is a very good guideline for you to set your property up, even for other bursaries, because that will kind of just give you a certain standard that you need. So if you get the basics right and you have that accreditation, you can really maximize your rental, and you can then also ensure that your vacancies, you have as little vacancies as possible. What I have seen is that something that is really a big deterrent, where you will end up with, no matter how nice your place is, you will end up with vacancies, is around the person that is going to be interacting with the students directly on a day-to-day basis. You want to have somebody that's strict, that can enforce rules, that can but still talk to them and communicate with them in a respectful manner. Because I think sometimes, everybody's like, this is a student and it's a whatever, and they end up being very forceful, and they don't see it as being a normal tenancy agreement, which is wrong. They'll just go into rooms when students aren't there to do maintenance or whatever. But so all of that kind of that people aspect. How do you enforce discipline if somebody has broken a rule? How do you enforce discipline? How do you punish them, but without creating this whole negative vibe in the house where everybody is now against you? Because a lot of students, if you treat them badly, they will group together and they will stand up against you. And if all of a sudden, in some places, students every single month must release the payment to the landlord. And if you have treated them badly, they will withhold the rent from you. So So I cannot, and that's, there's lots of other things as well. But for me, this is something that is really, this time of year is standing out for me, is around your people management skills and being able to navigate the culture and the situation in your property. And if you treat them with respect, and you help them with, because students come with a lot of personal challenges. They're away from home for the first time ever. A lot of them that might never have left their family house. And if you can help them adjust and be that parent, but not a parent, because they have to stand on their own feet as well. If you can fill that kind of space, then the best thing is to keep your property full, to make sure that your rental comes in. You have to have a good reputation, and you have to have, you need to be full. That is the major thing. In Port Elizabeth, for instance, there's somebody there, I'm not going to name names, but that he's literally sitting on 30% occupancy, not because he has a bad product or a bad property, but literally just because of the way that the students are treated. So that is what I wanted to just to emphasize. And I think the other thing that Reinard said before as well is around your admin. It was a huge shock for me, and the admin has not gotten less over time. Okay, it's just getting more and more and more in terms of vetting a student, filling in the right information at the different portals and universities, at NSFAS, and it's a lot. And if you make a mistake, a student might get a travel allowance instead of an accommodation allowance. And then, sorry for you, but you're never going to see that money because the student can't afford it and NSFAS is not going to pay you anymore. So you have to be very, very detailed and specific with your admin, or, again, that rental is not going to come in and you're going to sit with a lot of bad debt. And those are the two things, vacancies and bad debt, that will kill you. That's an electricity, okay? Make sure your electricity usage is under control. But those are the three things I think that, it's like if you can manage those three things, you will have a very stress-free, profitable accommodation that'll work for you.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for sharing that. And, I'm just going to ask Reinard, budgeting is crucial. I mean, what are some of the unexpected costs, budgeting mistakes new investors could make? And this is certainly, I think, Retha share them. But Reinard, I mean, maybe you want to expand on that, but also, when assessing funding applications, what are the non-negotiables investors need to get right to qualify for your funding support?
Yeah, I think I've touched on it briefly in some of the previous answers, but like I said, we do assess the financial risk, the business risk, and the entrepreneurial risk. In this instance, the business risk and the financial risk is sort of already taken care of. So a lot of the focus will be around the entrepreneurial risk. Here we will, like I said, look at your experience. We wouldn't want to fund someone who's venturing into this for the first time without the relevant support or network, or someone that approaches us to determine whether opportunity is viable. That's a discussion we can have, and we're always happy to engage with entrepreneurs if it's an inquiry and just asking me, what can I, just broad guidelines, what should I look for? But that's a discussion much better suited to people like Retha. We're always happy to engage with everyone, but in that stage, that wouldn't be a funding application, that's a consultation. We would expect you to know the market. We would expect you to know whether it's a good opportunity when you do approach us for funding, to have done some of the legwork. We would want to see some financial track record. So if you've been doing it informally and you're starting to scale up or looking at scaling up, I think it would be an important step for all entrepreneurs to take, specifically from a funder's perspective, to start formalizing your operation. Register a company, get some financials so we can track your performance, because at the end of the day, a bank or business partners or any financier needs to look at something to substantiate the investment. And that only comes through on the financial statements and your track record. And then that also shows your ability to manage a business, which is very important. So in the startup phase, I would say if you're just starting out new to this, probably we'd advise you to do the same, just to build up a track record. But at that stage, it would probably be too early for an investor like us to get involved. But there would be support in other areas. Then I would say it's also, like I mentioned earlier, when you do have a track record and your business is going and you are looking at an opportunity, just make sure that you do have the resources in place to manage the property efficiently. A question that frequently gets asked at our committee meetings and when we do assess something is, what is your span of control over the investment? And then also, does the entrepreneur's experience and his financial track record and balance sheet align to what he's trying to take on? Like I mentioned earlier, a 2-bedroom flatlet or something like that doesn't translate into you being able to manage a 30 million rand investment in student accommodation. Although it still remains a strong market, in that instance, it would be, if you do spot an opportunity like that, I would advise getting the support of someone like Retha, getting parties involved where you can introduce the opportunity to them and bring a full picture of the investment. In that way, you could still be involved. But that generally, I think, is a misconception, is that it is something that is suitable for beginners, where you can just invest the money and sit back and watch it grow. Yes, it is a strong market, but it does require active involvement and active management, and we do need to see those skills in place.
Excellent. Good. Thanks for that. So Retha, as your portfolio grew, what changed in how you manage properties? I mean, the tenants, the systems, and, what should new investors prepare for? Now, you have shared some of them because I think you've got a slightly different approach to how you manage students. And so maybe you just want to embellish a bit on that?
Yeah, so as we grew, I mean, in the beginning, one of the big components is around the technology that you use, right? So you kind of start off with emails and spreadsheets, and then you need to migrate and get better and better technology involved in the whole process. Because I at the moment, like for 2,000 beds, we process 10,000 applications, which has 50,000 inquiries, all in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks. So to do that, you're not going to do that by manual email and so on. So you really need to look at it. And obviously, if you're filling 30 beds, the same multiples apply. Obviously just on a bit of a smaller scale. So definitely that's something that changed. And then obviously, if you have a first year that's living with you, you technically can have a tenant for 3 years, okay? And you don't need to look at how do I re-recruit people every year, because that, number one, costs a lot of money and it's very stressful. So it's really about giving services to the students while they are living with you. Again, making your culture in the property, getting that right, living and learning program, living and learning spaces. There's so many things we do. We do community service events with them. We do business networking events, year-end events. There's so many social things that we do for students, so that also gives them for them to renew. So we spend a lot of effort and time during the year and marketing internally with students so that they will renew for the next year. Because we don't want to be looking for new students all over. And it's nice if you have people that lived with you before, because they can then train the new people on how it works here. Okay, so that's definitely something that we're focusing on. And as you grow, that is really what you want to do. And word of mouth, getting students to refer their friends and bringing them in, it makes your life easier at the end of the day. And then, I think, if you're starting out, do something that's closer to where you are, where you can, be in touch and you can see and touch the place, you can visit it, and so on. Especially if you want to manage it yourself, because a lot of things will pop up. Neighbors are going to complain. There's going to be parties and things that shouldn't have happened, and all kinds of things. So you need to be close to your problems, okay? Especially in the first year, so that so that you can sort out whatever. But then as you grow, then obviously you'll learn how to. And it really is a business, like Reinard says, because even if you have one, like a house, a commune with, let's say, 15 students, which is quite small. So if you have that, you're dealing with 15 students, tenants, okay? If you had normal rental tenants, that would have been a mini business, isn't it? So you have to treat that one house as a business with staff. You're going to have a caretaker, cleaner. You're going to have to do the admin, and all of a sudden, it really becomes it is a business, and you need to know how to be an entrepreneur, and then learning those skills, and then growing it over time to be able to do more and more of those business HR. If you have a job somewhere, you'll know all about HR and visiting them, and the finance department, and budgets, and budgeting is extremely important. So yeah, so that's what I would say.
Excellent. No, good. I think what you've alluded to Rit, is that it's just so much more than just renting out a room, isn't it? It's just a room with Wi-Fi. There you just put your bag and go away. You're offering a complete experience, and that you got to find ways to differentiate yourself, because we've heard so many horror stories in this space of where things go wrong, really go badly wrong. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important, and for our audience to understand that. So Reinard, I'm going to ask you, as a financier, have you seen any standout success stories or models where investors use financing to scale their student housing and their businesses effectively? Because, after all, you did finance them and there was something that stuck out.
Yeah, there's one that's specifically a real rags to riches story that's actually posted on our website, as well as the Shaka residence at TUT. It's about an entrepreneur named Tsebo, who literally spent some time homeless and built himself up from there, and he's now housing, I think, about 700 students. Really an amazing story. I'm not personally acquainted with that deal, but I'd encourage everybody to go have a read. I think the one that I did recently down in the Western Cape was an entrepreneur, and I won't share any trade secrets, unfortunately.
Sure.
But
No, that's fine.
he basically has been going at this for a number of years, and had a really sizable business. He worked on a rental model, and everything fell flat a couple of years ago. No other financiers would touch him because he's got a bit of a poor credit record. He's failed once, but from that he's learned, and he's fixed his business model, and he's addressed the risks. When now he again houses more than 1,000 students across the country, also on a rental model. He's got really strong relationships with universities, and we're assisting him now to not only rent but acquire some of those properties. And I think that speaks to his resilience, and it speaks to his knowledge and how important it is to have those relationships with universities, understanding NSFAS, because at the end of the day, that is what got him back up on his feet, is having the relationships. Sometimes that carries you through the difficult times. And yeah, we're very pleased to work with him and support him in his growth.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Reinard. So, okay, what I'm going to do now is going to jump to the questions. There's quite a few. Thank you for all your questions. Anybody has questions, please send them through. And I'm just going to run through some of them. A question from Charlie says, are the two institutions, and I assume he's talking about Business Partners and My Student House, ready to operate or assist upcoming entrepreneurs in countries other than South Africa? Well, I would say immediately South Africa first. Try and focus on that first before we start going to other African countries. But I don't know whether, Rita, you probably got aspirations to go outside of, South Africa. And Reinard, I don't know about Business Partners, whether you are operating. I would assume at this stage it's all South African focused. I don't know. Any comments, any thoughts on that?
So from our side, we are busy looking at expanding to the UK and Mauritius. So interestingly, Mauritius, obviously, so I can go have a holiday there during, university break time, but it's really, they actually have a British university there. So we have some meetings planned with them for August, and then the UK, we're busy with our visas and what so that we can open up a branch over there. So yeah, we are.
Excellent. No, great. Thanks, Richard. So, and I think it's really a trait of an investor that obviously would like to expand if it's really difficult to operate here. It's a natural thing for an investor to look in other areas to move out. But for the purposes of today's particular webinar, we're talking about South Africa in particular, Charlie. But yes, first get it right in South Africa, then we can start looking elsewhere. Another one from Charlie is, in your experience, which one is affordable and viable? A purpose-built accommodation or rehabbing an already built infrastructure? I think that's a question for you, Retha, from your experience. Buying an affordable and viable or a purpose-built accommodation or rehabbing an existing built infrastructure. Your thoughts there, Retha?
Okay, so building something from the ground up. I think we there's just a piece of land and you're developing. It's a lot more expensive, 2 to 3 times more expensive than buying an actual building that exists already, and then you just kind of refurbing it, maybe creating a room or two, furniture, renovation, that sort of thing. For you can for 100 to 125,000 a bed, you can do an existing building. Whereas the last time I spoke to some developers that were doing developments, they were talking about 250,000 a bed. I don't know if the prices have gone up since then. So there is a difference, but obviously doing it yourself, or with your own design and that sort of thing, obviously it comes with other benefits. You can design it the exact way that you want it. You don't have to come up with weird and wonderful ways to make things work. So it does have those advantages. But I think from a cost perspective, even some of the developers that we were helping are now actually just, buying and refurbing, and not the normal developments are now just normal tenants, or they sell it. But for people, for keeping and the yields and that sort of thing, it's more a refurbing thing. I think that's in my view doing better.
Okay, great. Okay, Reinard, I see there's a question about, we inquired about finance for student accommodation. Business partners advise 80% if it's not owner occupied. Can I just please reach out to receive clarity on the finance part? Maybe you just want to comment on that, Reinard?
Yeah, I'm not clear. 80%? Do you mean that they only fund 80% of the
It sounds like it. It sounds like 80%. Yes. Yeah.
No, it's not. We don't have a rigid policy on that. So you're welcome to reach out to me, and then I will clarify, and you can just send me the information. I'll check. If you spoke to someone at Business Partners, you can share their name, and I'll also give them a call. I don't know how long ago this was, but I have no problem following up on that one.
Okay, great. So I think it's a shout out to, and you didn't supply your name anonymous, but we would assume that, reach out to Business Partners. They're keen to sit down. They want to finance you. They want to support you. So please do that. Okay. So then, Retha, question is, are you NSFAS credited? And if so, how do you balance not receiving payment? Good question. From February and sometimes up until May, but having to accommodate students at that time. So whole cash flow management, isn't it, Retha? You probably love this question, don't you?
I do. That's my favorite question. I'm so glad somebody asked that. Yeah, I think so all of our properties are NSFAS accredited. So there's a couple of ways that you can manage it. You can either say, listen, you need to do your numbers, and you can say 30% of this property I'm going to put private students in so that I can manage my cash flow month on month. So I've had people that specifically wanted to do that. Obviously, with private students, sometimes the rental isn't as much as with NSFAS students, but at least you get it sooner. So it's a good trade-off. But you need to do your numbers, and it's very specific per area and that sort of thing. The other way is that I say to people, year one, you're setting up the property and so on. You're gonna get cash coming through. Don't spend it. Don't go on holiday. Put it in the bank. Put it in a savings account. Have at least 6 months, okay? 6 months of expenses, your bond, your water, electricity, everything in a savings account, and even the money that you want. So say, for instance, your estimate of your profit on this property is that you can pay yourself 10 or 20 or 30 or 50,000 a month. Even that, have that as an expense saved up for 6 months, because from November to May, those are the months that I plan for no income. And then I can release out of my savings account slowly the money until I then get paid. That is the best way. And the best way to do it, year one, don't take any money, just save it until you get to the 6 months. And then after that, you can start taking a little bit and having fun with it, because that's why we do it, right? So reinvest it or whatever. But it's extremely important to have that cash available somewhere. Otherwise, like I say, you balance it off with private students.
That's wonderful. I think that's really good advice there, Retha, I think, and because we had quite a few questions on that one, in terms of, how do you keep your cash flow running with delayed payments and that kind of thing. And then there was also a question around, I have 2 properties in Pretoria and Hatfield, and I'm struggling to maintain a positive cash flow. And obviously, this is a levies problem. It's eating into my cash flows. What can one do? Now, in Johannesburg, I understand, and in Gauteng, I picked up last week that quite a few property investors just had an unlucky windfall. There's 1,000 rand just added on, levy just added on to their account without, it's just fallen out of the sky. And unfortunately, no sort of heads up on that. So yes, it's
Neale, what I wanted to say about that is that
yes, please.
You have to also buy right, because you can't overpay for a property, number one. So if you buy
also good
something
advice.
that's already a running investment or running student accommodation, people want to charge you quite a lot for that. And then the numbers, if you have a surprise like that, you're going to struggle to cope with it. Number two, don't buy too small. Doing 3 students in a flat or even 10 students in a house, it's very small. If your margins or the amount of cash flow that you get will be very low, because there's a lot of things like this levy, whether you have 3 students or 50 students, it'll impact you a lot more if you have 3 versus 50. So it's important to also not buy too small or even start too small, because of all these fixed charges, like your Wi-Fi, these levies, your rates and taxes, all of those things. And if you're too small and you're too tight, you are gonna struggle, and it will have a big impact on you. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I think great. I think once again, fantastic advice. And I just want to let the audience out there, there's a course that's coming up. It's an online course that Retha will be hosting. It's on the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and we will be sharing that link at the end. She does train students. She's written a book. And in fact, we'll drop the link, a book about creating wealth in student accommodation. So it's coming from the expert over here. I will drop the link in there, or you can go to the rei.co.za website, both for the book and also for the course. But Reinard, coming back to you, there was a question around, and I think you mentioned it already, but maybe it's probably a good point just to reiterate it to the audience in terms of finance. And Zulela asked, do you assist startups as business partners? And I think you used a very good example earlier on. Maybe you just want to share a little bit more about that.
I think, look, in theory, like I said, business partners doesn't have any specific exclusions in terms of what stage of it. But it's very difficult to assess an entrepreneur with no financial background and no experience. So remember, then I have nothing to base my investment recommendation on. I have to justify the investment, let's say, to a committee or to some member that needs to eventually invest the funds. It's very difficult to make a case. So I would advise, specifically in that case, again, to get in touch with someone like Retha to help you out, to then say, you know what, bring this to the party and then we'll look at it. But it is quite difficult to get a startup going in student accommodation without the necessary experience. It's a bit different where, let's take an exception. Someone is a developer, they are well acquainted with property and how property values work, and have some limited experience in managing properties and so forth. Or someone has an existing business that has a good cash flow and they now want to venture into this. I still have a financial track record to base the entrepreneur's history on, so I can see, you know what, this guy can manage a business. And then you'll just approach someone to say, you know what, and these people will help me to manage the property until such a time I can get it up and running. We wouldn't see that technically as a startup. It's more difficult where it's day one, start off the ground running, you want to get funding for, let's say, a 5 million rand property or something, and you have nothing to back that up. I think that's very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good. Great. And I think there's some some wonderful questions. There's the link, and then obviously for the book. And then I'd like to encourage you to obviously reach out, and we'll leave Reinard's details as well, because we've got a financier in the room. We've got a property expert in the room who's willing to take you on. And there's a course, as I mentioned, it's a 3-day, 7, 8, 9. And there's all the contact details there. Please reach out to business partners. As I say, you know, Reinard and his team are waiting to meet up with you. And what's the first step, Reinard? Do we make an appointment? Because I see there's a lot of questions around there. What's the ideal way? How would you like to engage with the people? Set up a meeting, or just do the application, or that kind of thing? How would that work?
Well, look, you can just start off with an application online, but you can always just give me a call as well. My number will be shared, and my details. Or Kumin, who's my colleague. I know she's in the room, but I don't think everybody can see her or knows about her. She's in marketing.
She has put up your details up over there. Yeah.
Excellent. So you're welcome to give me a call. Otherwise, if you want to just try it online, you're welcome to do that. But in any case, at some stage, you will be speaking with me, and I'd be happy to engage with you and just guide you through the process, and maybe just give you a quick in-principle view of the transaction that you want to consider before you go through the full 100% application process.
No, absolutely. And there's two very good questions here, and it's for you, Reinard, definitely in terms of entity, and I think Retha might want to also add to that. One's from Vanessa. She says, what is the turnaround time for the finalization of a finance transaction? Obviously, we've got a property in place. What are we looking at? And then secondly, from Wynand. Wynand has asked, what legal entity would you suggest for new investor in the market? I mean, you know, you're dealing with sole proprietors, PTYs, you know, CCs, etc. Maybe you want to just give an indication on that.
We don't have a preference as to the entity, as long as we do see some formal financials, a formal track record, and you are managing it properly. It's not a problem. We can see tax compliance and that kind of thing. So we have no property. It depends very much on your future plans, what you plan to do with a property. Do you want multiple entities and so forth? And there's arguments to be made, but that depends on your future plans. As a first step for us, we don't have a preference. Then in terms of the timeline, that very much depends on how quickly we can get the information we need to make a decision. You'll have a very clear picture of that after the first conversation with us. We do have quite a detailed due diligence process, but everything we need will be discussed early on and reviewed and so forth. It depends. It can be anything from, I wouldn't ever say for property transactions, anything below 3 weeks ever to get the due diligence across the line. And then obviously legal work and so forth thereafter, but you'll have your approval. That's on the shorter end of the scale. And in some instances where it's a very difficult opportunity and we don't have all the information, so it can take can take significantly longer, but it is dependent on the specific scenario.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for that, Reinard. Okay, so in closing, what I'm going to ask each one of you to do. So as I mentioned, first of all, reach out to Reinard and his team. They're waiting for you. There's their numbers, business partners. All the details are on the link below, and they will also reach out to you as well. And so I think I want to close off now. And I think for those questions, I know there were some questions we didn't answer. Some were more arbitrary ones, and I think there was some duplication with some of them. But I'm going to ask Retha just to give her closing thoughts. Maybe just share a little bit about predictions for student housing over the next few years, maybe leave somebody with one piece of advice for somebody who's wanting to enter the student accommodation space today.
So I think the one piece of advice that I will give is that you have to get your timing right, okay? There's a very short period of time, which we call intake, which happens in the beginning of the year, where all the students come in. It's like the sardine run in Durban, okay? When they're there, you can get as many as you want, but when it's over, you have to go fish one by one. So it's like that. So where we are right now in the year, if you want to be ready for next year in 2026, you have to be out there, and in the next 2 to 4 weeks, you need to sign offers, you need to get your finance in, you still have to convert, you have to get furniture, you have to get your accreditation done. All of that, your marketing needs to start in December. So all of that takes time, right? So if you're serious about 2026, you better get those OTPs signing right now, which is why we're doing this course as well, to help people through that process so that they don't miss the intake for 2026. So that's, I think, the closing comment that I want to do today.
Wonderful. Great. And it's wonderful as always having you, Retha. I'm going to answer some of the questions on the event coming up, but Reinard, I want to get your closing thoughts, maybe piece of advice if you're looking for finance for student accommodation.
Yeah, firstly, thanks, Neil. Thanks for today and everything.
Absolute
and everybody
pleasure.
for joining. And then if any of the questions that are unanswered, you're welcome to just share that afterwards. If it pertains to business partners or how we do things, please do share that through an email or something. You're welcome, and I'll address that. I think my key piece of advice would be, in a market like this that is booming, there's a lot of stakeholders, right? And there's a lot of resources that you can use and a lot of information you can gain. Make sure to use your resources, use people like Retha, use people like Neale. Make sure you get the proper advice so that when you do approach a financier, you already have all the pieces of the puzzle in place, or at least 80%. Then it's very simple to get your funding over the line. It's very difficult when you come with I found a property, I think it can be a student accommodation, what do you think? And then that's where the discussion starts. So just for your own sake, for ease of reference, and for getting your access to funding, definitely try to prepare yourself, be knowledgeable about the subject, about the market, and make use of your resources.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. That's Reinard Botha. He's the regional manager at Business Partners, and you reach out to him. And I just want to mention, because there are a lot of questions from Anonymous, they're asking about municipal bylaws, which is going to be different in each area. Retha will deal with this on a course. I suggest you come along. What advice do you have for service provider to grow their business with limited buildings? All of these things. How do you make management booking system for students? And of course, Retha's got all these different systems that she's using very successfully. Come along to the course. Somebody said 7th, 8th, and 9th of October. Okay, and there is an early bird deal now. It's under 3,000 Rand. It's an absolute bargain. There is a link in the link below. You go to the rei.co.za website. And when will you host the tour of your student? We're definitely going to host a tour, a bus tour. We had such a successful bus tour. We had about 30 people on it before, and Retha was our host, and she took us around to all these wonderful properties. So I suggest jump onto the course, but most importantly, if you find that property, sit down with business partners, It is also a question about, will they assist first-time home buyers that want to purchase an existing student house? Absolutely. And so you need to sit down with them to see whether you qualify. You need to arrange a meeting. They will let you know of what's going on. So first of all, I just want to say to everybody, thank you for joining us today. It's really been, I think, a very insightful conversation. And once again, I say to reach out, get a copy of Retha's book, join her course, and then for those seeking finance, book a meeting with business partners, explore how they can finance your next student accommodation investment. And the recording of this will also be available on the rei.co.za website. We'll also be emailing to you who registered for this particular event. Don't forget our webinar tomorrow. We've got another webinar tomorrow. Can you believe it? We're talking about short-term accommodation, and there is a link once again in the if you look at the chat box just below there, you can check it out there. But it's wonderful chatting. It's wonderful having Retha, wonderful having Reinard on. And for all our attendees, thank you very much. And to Retha and Reinard, thanks for your input. Until next time, that's tomorrow. Keep learning, keep investing, and keep growing. This is Neale Petersen of REI signing out along with Retha and Reinard. Cheers, everybody.